welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're going to be making some cookies, and I'm also going to be teaching you how to make modifications to your cookie recipe without screwing it up. So today I'm going to be starting with my great-grandma's chocolate chip recipe, but I'm going to be altering it. I don't have any chocolate chips, but I do have cocoa powder, so we're going to make these cookies chocolate, just no chocolate chips. And I also have some of these Heath bits, which if you don't know what Heath bits are, they're like little toffee bits that I want to use up, and some leftover pecans that we're going to put in there too. And also, the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of butter, which would be the same thing as 3 sticks, since 1 stick is the same thing as a 1/2 cup. However, I only have 2 sticks, so I'm going to replace the 3rd stick with some canola oil. And I'm going to do a 1-for-1 substitution. So a 1/2 cup is the same thing as 8 tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those little markings there. So I'm going to just measure out 8 tablespoons of this to make up for the missing stick. And I think that's going to work out well, because when you're making changes to a baking recipe, you can usually get away with it as long as you make sure that you keep your solid ingredients to liquid ingredients ratio pretty much the same. So because I'm going to be adding an extra dry ingredient with the cocoa powder, this is going to be more of a liquid ingredient, so it should make up for it. Alright. First, we have to get our butter to room temperature. I haven't had it sitting out long enough for that. So what we're going to do is microwave it for a little bit. Alright, I'm going to put this in for 1 minute on 50% power with my cover in case it splashes. Alright, I decided to check on this after about 30 or 40 seconds, and a good thing I did, because it's definitely, it's soft enough now. If you can make a fingerprint in it, then that's just right. Alright, so we're going to put this in our large bowl. We're going to be mixing our wet ingredients in the large bowl, and then we're going to mix our dry ingredients separately in the little bowl. And I'll have all the ingredients listed down in the description. So when I say liquid and solid, you might notice it's not exactly liquid, like butter isn't really liquid, but it's more of a wet ingredient. The one exception to that is that we are going to put in our sugar right now. The first step is to cream our butter and sugars together. So even though these are dry, we cream them with the butter first to make the base of the cookie dough. Alright, so this recipe calls for 1 1/8 cup each of regular sugar, also known as granulated sugar, and 1 1/8 cup of the brown sugar. So I normally just make it simple and do 1 cup of the plain sugar and 1 1/4 cup of the brown. That way you don't have to worry about measuring 1/8 cups. For example, my measuring cup set didn't even come with an 1/8 cup. The smallest it comes with is a 1/4, but 2/8 equal a 1/4. So we're just gonna have a little bit more brown sugar, which I think it gives it a nice flavor if it has a little bit more brown sugar. Alright, so I've scooped out my sugar, and now I'm gonna level off the top with the back of my knife. I'm gonna do that down into the bag so we don't make a big mess. It's nice and level on top, well, pretty much, right? Okay, now the brown sugar is pretty much the only ingredient I'm aware of that you actually have to pack down into your cup. This is dark brown sugar. You can also get light brown sugar. I don't really know if it matters for this recipe. Some recipes call for one or the other, light or dark brown sugar. So it can make a difference. This one doesn't really specify, so I just use whatever I have on hand. Today we have the dark. Alright, so now we need to level that off also. you might notice it's packed in tight, like when you're making a sandcastle. Just like a little sandcastle. Okay, so now we have our butter and sugars, but we don't want to forget that missing stick of butter. So I'm going to do my 8 tablespoons of this canola oil into here. You could probably, I think you could use vegetable oil also. Cool. Thanks. All right. Alright, so now we're supposed to cream our butter and sugars together. So we're going to use our electric mixer for that. Alright, let's get some of this stuff out of the way. It's always good to keep your sugar wrapped up tight so it doesn't end up becoming hard as a rock. Alright, so the word the recipe uses is beat, not cream. They're kind of the same thing, I think. I don't know, let me know if I'm wrong. Basically, we're just going to beat the butter and sugars together until they start to look fluffy and light in color. Wiping down the sides of the bowl is really important because it helps make sure that all your ingredients get mixed together evenly. You don't want to have little clumps of butter or sugar stuck to the sides that didn't get mixed in correctly. Alright, this brown sugar had a couple of little clumps like this that were just hardened like little pebbles, and the mixer isn't really grabbing hold of them, so I'm just going to smash them with the back of the spatula. That is what tends to happen when you don't get your brown sugar closed up tightly, is parts of it start to get hardened, and if it really is exposed to the air, the whole thing will turn into a hard block. Now, somebody else closed this sugar for me last time it was used, and they didn't squeeze all the air out of the bag. I'm not naming names. Alright, I think that's fluffy enough. Normally if you were using all butter with your sugar, it would get a little bit puffier looking, but it's not going to be the same since I substituted the oil. But it still looks fairly light and fluffy, so we're going to go with that. Our next step is to add our eggs and water to this bowl. So we have 3 eggs, and then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of just water. So I'm going to fill that up at the sink with my tablespoon and just put it in this cup so it doesn't spill as I'm carrying it over to the dish. Alright, so I have my 2 tablespoons of water in here. Just make it so it's like a little dent, and then just put your fingers into that little hole that you just made and just pry it open like a hinge on a door. Careful, because sometimes if the membrane isn't broken and you stick your thumb in there, and you'll break the membrane and it'll like come exploding out. Not really, but it'll come bursting out of the hole. Okay, so now it's time to put the dry ingredients in our smaller bowl. So we're having 3 3/8 of a cup of flour, and I know that's sort of an odd amount, but I don't know. Don't argue with great grandma. So, let me just dry this cup that got wet. You don't want to use a wet cup with the flour. And I'm using 100% whole wheat flour. This kind is actually called white whole wheat flour. It's still 100% whole wheat, but I don't know how they do it exactly, but it's finer and lighter in some way. So it's supposed to be better for baking than just your regular whole wheat flour. You might notice my bag sort of looks wet, or it's got condensation on the outside. That's because when I'm not using the flour, I keep it in the freezer, inside, sealed inside a bag, of course, to keep it fresh longer. Alright, so next, it's the 3/8 that we have to measure. So we have here a quarter cup. Quarter cup is the same as 2/8. So I'm going to do this whole cup, and then I'm going to do half of this. So remember earlier I was saying that brown sugar is the only ingredient that you want to pack. So flour you definitely don't want to pack down. You want it to be light and fluffy. But because of the way that I dig my cup down in, it does get packed a little bit. So, and also whole wheat flour tends to be a little more dense than your white flour. So that can also lead to baked goods being a little too heavy. So the way that I stop that from happening is I take a big pinch out after I measured the flour and put it back. And that just makes up for any extra flour that might have gotten in due to the packing, and it also helps make up for the density of the flour. So that's going to help keep it light. And then also, once I add my other dry ingredients, I'm going to whisk this up with a whisk, which will also add more air and make it lighter. I always replace all the white flour in my baking recipes with completely replaced with 100% whole wheat, and I haven't had any problems with them turning out too heavy or going flat. So I guess these tricks work. Alright, we need 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda. I have here my 1/2 teaspoon, so I'm going to do 3 of these for 1.5 teaspoons. And the baking soda box comes with a little edge here, so you don't even have to use the knife to level it off. 1, 2, 3. I feel like that owl in the Tootsie Pop commercial. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then we need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I'm not bothering to level this off, as you can see. I'm just sort of eyeballing if it's pretty level. Salt is more for the taste. It's not like a make it or break it ingredient like your baking soda is. The baking soda is what makes the cookies rise, so they don't turn out flat and hard. So that's important to get it measured correctly. But yeah, you can just eyeball the salt as long as it's close. Alright, so I think that's all our dry ingredients. Yes, so we're gonna whisk these up. Okay, and I don't want to forget the cocoa, which I almost did just forget. So we're gonna add our cocoa now into the dry ingredients. And I'm gonna start with a 1/4 cup and just see how it looks. Maybe just about an 1/8 cup or so. Okay, I think this will be good. Don't want to add too much and have it be too dry. If you add too much, it can make it too dry. Now, the fact that we made our wet ingredients be a little more
the fact that we made our wet ingredients be a little more wet than usual because we replaced 1 stick of butter with the oil, that should help balance the fact that we're adding an extra dry ingredient. But we don't want to overdo it. Alright, so now we're going to slowly add our dry ingredients to the wet ingredients, and then halfway through we add the vanilla, which is what this recipe calls for. But in this case, where did I put it? Here. I'm not listening to great grandma, and I'm replacing the vanilla with almond extract because I just like it better than vanilla. So you could put any flavoring in there that you like, and I like this one. I'm going to scrape down once more. We're about halfway through adding the dry ingredients. So I'm going to add my extract. And you might notice that on the very last part where you add the last of your dry ingredients, the dough gets harder and harder to mix. So just persevere. Right now I'm going to do the last scrape and the last blend, and then we'll add our mix-ins. In this case, the Heath bits and the pecans. Okay, so it's time for the mix-ins. Now, if you can really add whatever you want. So they're saying, or great grandma is saying, to add, alright, so 3 12-ounce bags of chocolate chips and 1.5 cups of walnuts. So, as long as you don't exceed the total amount of mix-ins by too much, then it's fine because the cookies will still have enough dough to hold it together. If you put in way more mix-ins than what the recipe calls for, your cookies might start to crumble apart a little bit because there won't be enough sticky dough to mix-in ratio to hold it together. But you have a lot to play with here. So we're going to add this whole bag. So it looks like, yeah, this is great. All right, I can add more of the pecans. I'm going to add the rest of this bag. All right, so we're going to heat up our oven 325 degrees and get out the cookie sheets. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes and we are supposed to bake these for 10 to 12 minutes. So I'm just going to check on these. I think they could stay in for a little bit longer. They just look a tiny bit damp, not quite dry enough to be done yet. I am going to switch these while I'm in here. A lot of people like to switch the cookies halfway through. So for us that would have been at the 5 or 6 minute mark. I usually don't really bother unless I decide to do it at the end or near the end when I'm checking on them. Alright, 2 more minutes I think. Alright, so our cookies are done. As you can see, hopefully you can see, they look definitely drier than they did when we checked on them earlier. So that's a sign that they're done. I let them sit here on their trays on top of a cooling rack for just a few minutes. And now that's enough time for them to rest that we can now put them directly on the cooling rack. And we just want to leave enough space in between them that they can cool the rest of the way. Then later, once they're cooled off more, we can start to put them closer together and even stack them. Alright, let's see if one is cool enough to try. It's still pretty hot. Let's see. Looks good on the inside. It's really good. Alright, I think these turned out really good. I hope you have fun in your own kitchen making your own cookie creations if you choose to do so. And if they turn out well or they don't turn out well or whatever, leave us a comment. Let us know how it went and maybe let us know what are your favorite cookie creations to make. Have a great week. Bye!